Well, if the Colorado game was unacceptable and the Arizona State game was inexcusable, well, this one was just flat out too close for comfort. But USC does survive, and USC is undefeated, heading on a road trip that was supposed to be the beginning of the gauntlet. But I think the gauntlet started last Saturday night at the Coliseum. Welcome to Trojan Conquest Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Tim Prangley, our post-game host and host of many things here on the USC channel, of course, and Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire, joining us as always. Please leave those comments and questions there in the live chat as we talk college football, USC, with all of you. Tim, Matt, how are we doing tonight?
We're relieved, but only temporarily, because if this stuff keeps recurring, USC is going to be eating some losses pretty soon.
Well, this show format should probably take a similar journey as it did after the Arizona State or the Colorado game. They seem to be following a pattern in which we could first go to you, Matt, to uncover the ills of the Trojans and then kick it to Tim and see what his counterpoints might be.
I mean, where do we begin? I think a couple beginning points for the state of USC football. I think the first thing that I would start with is, what happened after the Colorado game? Lots of things, but one thing in particular was Bryson Shaw comes to the defense of Alex Grinch, passionately sticks up for his defensive coordinator and says, you know what? It's not Grinch's fault. It's us. Players are letting him down. Players aren't playing well enough. We aren't doing our jobs. So, I'm not being critical of Bryson Shaw for saying that. You want to go to bat for your coach, you believe in him, fine. But when you then say you believe in your coach, and when you say publicly, it's not him, it's us, and then us doesn't show up in the first quarter, and USC's defense gets trucked and was clearly not prepared to play, what are we left with, right? Where are we at when you say the coaches are not the problem and then you don't show up in the first quarter? You're acting as though you're not being coached well. You're acting as though whatever the coaches told you during the week, you didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. And I know this was a look-ahead game before Notre Dame. We all knew that this was a trap game. I get it. But, if you're going to say in public, we trust our coaches, and then you just completely no-show the first quarter, what kind of message are you sending? What kind of statement are you making? And that is just extremely concerning, right? Because if Bryson Shaw doesn't say that in public after the Colorado game, I'm not talking about it right now, but he did go public. And when you go public either as an athlete or a coach, you're not obligated to say certain things in public. You're making that choice to put things out into, the on the airwaves and put it out in the bloodstream of media commentary. And it's going to be a talking point if you bother to go public with something. Once you go public, once you make that decision, once you cross that Rubicon, you then need to back it up as a player. And the Trojans did not back it up as players. And that just tells me that whatever Alex Grinch is trying to do, it's not getting through. And let's also remind ourselves, this is the other, I think, really significant point, that USC hasn't played anybody. USC has not played anybody which is particularly good. San Jose State, Nevada, Stanford, Arizona State. Colorado might be a bowl team. Colorado might be 6-6. But USC has played 6 teams, which probably aren't going to win more than 6 games. And 4 of those teams might not win more than 3. And so 6-0 is great. That is true. And you do need to win your clunkers, which USC has done a couple times, but this team's not improving. And this team is soft, and this team is not disciplined. And you can't just flip the switch. Now, I will say that, USC has probably been in energy conservation mode mentally as well as physically because of the 9 straight weeks and all the other things that we've talked about, and it's a long season and it's a grind. And you're not going to have the same emotional intensity for Arizona State or for Stanford that you do for Notre Dame and Oregon and Washington. Like, I get that. We've all been there. We can all accept that. But when your performance is sloppy and uneven 3 straight weeks against teams you should be, drumming by 30, 40 points, that's different. So, in other words, the Arizona game was not a one-off, right? It wasn't just an isolated instance of USC being sloppy and unfocused against an inferior team. We've seen this 3 weeks, especially, 2 out of the last 3. Arizona State was significantly worse than Colorado, and then this Arizona game was worse than Arizona State. The consistency of the sloppiness, the consistency with which this team is not locked in, that's certainly alarming. And so maybe Notre Dame wakes up this team and you get that big game focus. And maybe this game also creates a dynamic in which, USC has been playing what I call mental defense, not talking about tactical defense, mental defense. Like, you're taking everyone's best punch. Everyone who plays you views you as their Super Bowl. Like, Arizona schemed and coached this game really hard. It's like USC was the game of the season for the Wildcats. We were saying the similar things after the Arizona State game. Kenny Dillingham was just throwing the whole kitchen sink at USC. Like, the Trojans were getting things from the Sun Devils they weren't getting from anyone else. It was very similar against Arizona. Like, Arizona really studied up in terms of how to defend USC's receivers and passing game. Lincoln Riley really didn't adjust to running the ball against a light tackle box until midway through the game. That's part of the slow start for USC. But this larger concept of mental defense, USC is just trying to protect itself, absorb the opponent's punch. That needs to change. USC needs to stop playing mental defense, and whatever mental holistic energy it's been conserving because it knows how much of a grind the full 12-game season is, you can't conserve energy anymore. Now's the time for you to go balls out, all the way, and you're on the attack. You're USC. You're the Trojans. You have Lincoln Riley. You have Caleb Williams. Stop worrying about the opponent's best punch. You throw the best punch. You are not supposed to weather the storm anymore. You're supposed to become the storm. That mentality needs to set in for USC. You played the games that you were totally expected to win, but now you're getting to Notre Dame, Utah, Oregon, Washington. Don't worry about the best punch that the opponent will throw. You can throw your best punch. If you play your best, it doesn't matter what the opponent does. USC needs to take on an attack mentality and stop playing mental defense during this Notre Dame game.
Tim, this game took us from the level of, oh, this is a sloppy game, this is a poor performance, USC isn't putting this team away, but there's no threat of loss here, too. This game is in jeopardy. This game is this close, one play from being over as a loss. So I would categorize it in a different way.
In isolation, this game really wouldn't be much, but based on a kind of a started to look like a pattern and issues that are not being addressed, same issues, difficulty covering people down the deep middle, tackling in the boundary and the perimeter, giving up huge chunk plays. It's becoming, and just poor tackling in general, it's becoming an issue, along with the real story here. I mean, the defense, we know what the defense is. Look, at the beginning of the year, no one here thought that this defense was going to be a top 20 defense. If anyone did, they were sold a really bad bill of goods, because we knew this defense is really what it is, by the way. Points per game, this team is, if you take out the overtime, and you really should, take away 13 points in overtime, they held them to 28 points. You average 28 points, that means they're averaging giving up 24 points a game. Now, the balance of that is like, again, who have they played? But that's, it's a defense that has holes in it, but anyone out there that thinks that this is not a better defense than it was last year is completely off base. Just completely off base. There are issues, and they've run out of time. They no longer have time to fix the things that are still ailing them. So it's going to end up being some losses. It's going to. Unless somehow this thing's figured out in week 7, there are going to be losses. But let's also take a look at some of these teams. We're cracking on SC for being down this game. I don't think Washington trailed, but it was close. It came down to an onside kick, and then Washington held off Arizona. So it's not like Washington blew the doors off of Arizona at all. And we didn't hear a peep about Washington. Not a peep. They don't drop any, right? This is college football. And if you don't come to play, and Lincoln Riley said himself, it's my job to get guys ready. They walked out, walked through the first quarter. They absolutely slept. It was putrid. The defense couldn't stop anybody, and the offense couldn't get 3 and out. It was poor. After 17 minutes, they found themselves down 17 points. Down 17 points. This team hadn't been down the entire year. Not even for one play had they trailed this season. And they got back in the game because of the defense. If I told you guys, here's the stat line: 14 for 25, 205 yards, right? No interceptions, and so 56% completion percentage. That's very pedestrian at best. When was the last time you heard Caleb with 205 yards? Maybe the Oklahoma State game? They came out flat as hell. Arizona came out jacked up after last week, saying, hey, we can do this. We just went toe-to-toe with Washington, and they took it to USC and just smashed them. To USC's credit, the defense that's much maligned, you don't come back down 17 points unless your defense starts making stops. And they did. And it was really a situation of where they played the middle two, the second and third quarters. The defense was solid. First quarter was horrible. Third quarter wasn't bad, but they still had some of the issues they're having. They're having trouble with that toss play, just absolutely getting gashed on the ground. And there's 2 weeks in a row, Coleman and Scatabo, I talked about it on the Collins show. They made these guys look like Herschel Walker or like a Christian Okoye, right? A guy that if you don't stop him right away, he's just going to steamroll people. And these guys are not that caliber, and the USC was making them look like that. So there are some big problems on defense. But I'm more worried about the offensive situation, because the offense, again, I've never seen, as we saw Caleb had that hiccup game against Oregon State and come back out. I'm hoping the same thing again. But this team, remember, we got Caleb Williams. So all you guys worried about our defense, we had a worse defense last year, and Caleb carried us. So it's going to be interesting to see, playing Washington and Oregon on the schedule this time, what we can do, and playing in South Bend, not playing at home.
We invite your comments and questions here on USC Football. We come your way each and every Monday night. Trojan Conquest live every Monday at 8 Pacific time. Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. This is the time, if you have yet to do it, to lock in on Matt's work each and every day at Trojans Wire. And Tim, of course, hosts along with Tony and Rick our post-game show here at the Voice of College Football, and any call-in shows that we will provide throughout the season as well. Here we go with a super chat contribution coming in from Lemansky. Appreciate that. Widespread rain in the Midwest, 85% chance Saturday in Badgerland, Madison, and rain for South Bend, which sounds like a recipe to run the football with Audric Estime.
Yeah, and so USC fans might go, uh-oh, this is going to throw a monkey wrench into the passing game. But you know what? I'm going to say, bring it on, right? And this might be exactly what the USC offensive line needs to play a better game, to answer the challenge. The USC offensive line has been uneven. It's been spotty. But while the level of play from this USC offensive line hasn't been especially strong in recent weeks, let's also acknowledge Lincoln Riley is not putting this offensive line in the best possible position to succeed. I alluded to it earlier that, if teams are having 7-8 guys back playing center field, you have a light tackle box, you need to run the ball. And Lincoln Riley was not quick to do that against Arizona. Took him a while to do that. Once he did, then the passing game began to open up a little bit, and USC was able to find, a few plays. The passing game was never really consistent, but a few more plays opened up after USC ran the ball. You bring the linebackers up into the tackle box. So when we talk about Lincoln Riley needing to put this offensive line in a position to succeed, instead of coming into a game with the big picture idea of, well, we're going to throw against this defense or we're going to run against this defense. No, that shouldn't be Lincoln Riley's overall focus. It shouldn't be the 40,000 foot view. It should be what's right in front of his nose. Tackle box is stuffed, you throw. Tackle box is light, they're playing people back, you run. Like, it needs to be that simple. And with these conditions, USC might be more inclined, if it's rainy, as the forecast is for South Bend on Saturday, maybe this is what gets USC to lean into mashing some people, leaning on some people, establishing the run first. I mean, that's not usually how Lincoln Riley does it. He usually likes to come out gunning and then run later, mixing it in. But maybe the weather conditions will give Riley reason to lean on the running game as a first point of attack and then set things up for the downfield passing game with Caleb Williams. And that could be exactly what USC needs. That could be exactly the thing to light a fire under some fannies and get that offensive line to really, embrace the opportunity of being able to play ball again, being able to play at an elite level, because we have not seen this offensive line play at an elite level in recent weeks.
Thoughts about weather conditions, Tim, affecting SC's game plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you have thoroughbreds like and speed guys like USC has, we do have the speed advantage. We do have the better receivers, bar none. We got. I still say we obviously. I know there are a lot of Hartman fans there. We still have the best quarterback. We definitely have the better offensive coordinator. Mudding it down, making it messy, absolutely plays in the hands of Notre Dame, in my opinion. They got a big bruiser running back. Their offensive line looks suspect in pass protection, but they're still big guys, and they're going to run behind that left side with Alt. I'm not excited about getting to that team is a mutter, right? Not a thoroughbred's going to win you flat out, but they can just somehow plod through and get a win. Notre Dame loves making it ugly, making it dirty. They love making it messy. So I think this does not play in the hands of USC. USC is, by the way, we're not a finesse team. If you watch our quarterback, he doesn't finesse. He slams safeties into the end zone. We have our own thumpers too. So, I mean, it's tough. I watch our running backs with Austin Jones. He's not going to bat. He can battle through tackles. And Marshawn Lloyd has shown that he's a tough tackle as well. And then, they can go even deeper. So I think that it's going to be an issue of, can USC, I'm hoping LV's right, because LV's saying that the rain's going to break. Now, we could play in a little bit of mud. That's fine. Both teams slip. You know what I mean? I'd rather have us playing with a clean ball and not playing in the rain, because it's obviously going to limit our passing game. And they don't, that's our strength compared. They're strong on strong. Yes, they have Hartman, but again, questions about play calling, questions on the outside receiving. Those questions aren't there for USC. So we definitely want a passing game. In the passing game, you want a clean field.
I would agree with that. Like, if you were to ask me, do you want a clean game or a rainy game? Obviously, like cleaner, calmer conditions would play into USC's hands. But I said what I said in part because USC needs to stop playing mental defense. Instead of worrying what could be taken away, worrying that, we could lose this game, we could lose our opportunity, worrying, thinking about what you're going to lose or what you could lose. You need to flip that around and say, here's an opportunity for us to win a big game. Here's a chance for us to grow as a unit. Here's a chance for us to build confidence and belief. Like Lincoln Riley needs to be more conscious of building positivity into this team, because I'm not really seeing it on the field. I'm not seeing it in terms of the way this team goes about its business. And just for Alex Grinch, for a brief moment, I mean, I don't know what exactly he's talking to his players, but whatever it is, it's not getting through. There has to be a way for Grinch to talk to his players in a way that's been different from before. Like, there has to be a different tone, a different point of emphasis in terms of what the coaches are saying to players, because the way they're going about their business up to this point, it's not resonating. There needs to be a different mindset from the coaches filtering down to the players for this game. So in that sense, maybe, the adverse conditions gives Riley and Grinch an opening, a way to talk to these players about, hey, they think we're soft, rain, cold, night game. They think we're going to be a bunch of pansies and that Notre Dame's just going to roll right over us. Like that's a motivational angle that this USC staff has an opportunity to do something with. And maybe that unlocks a new attitude and a new dimension in this team, which, does need to appear. Like the way things have been going, business as usual, not going to cut it. Like this team does need to grow up, and maybe adverse conditions in South Bend, while not what we would naturally prefer, Tim, totally agree with you there. Maybe that's like the spark plug that, and you didn't really want it, but maybe it's not what you want, but it's maybe what this team needs to really, take on a much better winning championship level identity at USC.
And the thing we got to remember is a lot of people like to call the USC Trojans the surfer boys from blonde hair with blue eyes. You got to realize that, Caleb played in the DMV, so he's not. I like this comment. Rain will not affect Caleb's velocity on his throws. It probably won't. Being in the DMV, he's used to playing in the rain. You got guys like Pregnon who played in cold and wet in Wyoming. So, I mean, it's not like these guys are going to oh no, it's cold and rainy. I don't know I don't believe it's supposed to be cold. I know it's supposed to be wet. I don't know how cold it's supposed to be. But again, both teams got to play in the rain and the cold. And then they got, you Irish, you have some you got some players that from Southern California, so they're gonna have to deal with it as well. So I think it'd be great. I hate all games that are played in inclement weather because, quite frankly, it detracts from. It's not football weather. It's crap weather. It's crap for the fans. It's crap for the game. The BS the Midwest always throws around like, oh, this is real weather. Yeah, it's real weather for you sitting in the house and having a cocoa, not to go play football, because it gets messy, it gets muddy, it gets stupid, and sometimes you see a team that's maybe a little less athletic, a little slower, actually get the edge, and that's what I'm kind of worried about.
It's going to be a bit cooler than what I expected, and what our forecast here is a state away, but it's going to be like high 40s, low 50s. By that evening. So it's going to be a bit frosty, a bit chill in the air, along with possible rain. Yeah.
It's South Bend. There you go. Why are we surprised? It's always gloomy or gross there anyway.
But maybe this calls forth an extra level of toughness in USC that we haven't seen to this point in the season. Let's now hit on the other really big plot point for this USC Notre Dame game, unless there's anything, Tim, that you want to touch on from the Arizona game that we haven't already talked about.
I mean, just really quickly, you kind of covered. I pulled up some stats. Like, for instance, just being graded out. Caleb, by far his worst game as a Trojan. His PFF grade for offense was 62.2. His passing numbers. I won't throw a guess at it, Mark. What do you think his PFF number was for passing?
I don't even know what his numbers were, except he barely threw for 200 yards, right?
Yeah, 53.5. And threw for a little over north of 200 yards. And USC won this game. I know everyone wants to paint it as a loss. Even they've wanted to paint the last 3 games as losses. They're not. And you gotta be careful about making wins seem like losses. It's just there's no point to it. USC, if they play at this, is going to lose. But here's the thing. Even if USC plays like this, and even, by the way, the big thing was, well, if USC struggles, Caleb will pull them out, right? I want to flip the narrative. This defense is not going to win us games, but it was good enough on a night when our offense was terrible. The offense was terrible, flat. I just gave you his PFF numbers, and yet they found a way to win. And I know our OU loving our buddies out there, the OU people want to talk about culture, but it's difficult. I don't care who the opponent is to come down 17 points and come back and win the game. That does show something about the team. And realistically, this game let's talk about it. This game should have been right. We talk about triple overtime. They missed like a 20-yard field goal or a 17-yard field goal at the end of the game. Otherwise, USC walks off as a sloppy game. USC won 31-28, where Washington won 34-24, something like that. You know what I mean? There's not that much of a difference. The difference and the worry is that the defense is better, but it's not going to be good enough against. I mean, I'm not real worried about Notre Dame, but I am worried about Oregon at Autzen and Washington if they play like that again.
I personally would be concerned with Notre Dame. I think that USC is a better team, but not substantially better. I think they're better. I think they're a top 10 team, and maybe Notre Dame's a top 15 team. Like, I think there's not a whole lot of separation when you add it all up. Now, is USC more capable of blowing out Notre Dame than Notre Dame would be of winning it with a big margin against USC? I believe so. That's been Notre Dame's big issue in my eyes, has been twofold. Number one, the outside playmaking threats are non-existent. They don't exist. They're not there. They don't threaten a defense vertically. And then number two, their offensive line isn't what it typically is. It's just not nearly as good as its Notre Dame standard. I believe that the defense has played relatively well, and I've watched these games against the last three opponents. I think the defense is really good, and Hartman's fine. He presses late in games as any quarterback would, trying to erase a deficit. You know, Brett Favre once threw 6 interceptions and a playoff loss and was questioned about it afterwards. He's like, I'm trying to win the game, not protect my numbers. So when it's desperation time, you heave the ball downfield. But I think Notre Dame's still a really good football team, just a flawed and limited football team.
Yeah, my main thought about Notre Dame in this game is that, if you were to just look at it objectively, sizing up the personnel, sizing up, what the capabilities of each team, you would naturally make your first inclination to say USC's better because USC has Caleb Williams and Notre Dame has not been able to do much with Sam Hartman, not being able to score. So like just on paper, you would naturally be inclined to give the clear edge to USC. But we've seen plenty of times over the years Notre Dame rallying around the flag at home, whether as a national title contender or in cases like this where Notre Dame's a wounded dog, coming off a bad loss, smarting, but like this is the get right game. This is the play like a champion today game. This is the play with pride game. And as a college football historian, Mark, you remember this quote from the great Beano Cook: "There are two teams you never bet against at home, the Russian Army and Notre Dame." And so, plays into, Notre Dame could be 2-3, 4-4, whatever, but it's USC week coming into South Bend. Like if you're USC, you can't take this game for granted one bit. And this is the other thing that we've been talking about, kind of a recurring theme. Like Notre Dame should throw its best punch at USC, but USC needs to just transcend, and USC needs to get into this mindset of we're not worried about whether our opponent throws the best punch. If we play our best football, if we play up to our capabilities, if we play the way we're coached, the way we're taught to play, we're going to be better. And USC has not really reached that standard the last 3 weeks. I mean, against Stanford, sure, but Stanford's terrible. This is the time for USC to just plant its flag, play a good game against, not a great team. No one would say Notre Dame's great, but Notre Dame's a decent team. And at night, primetime, Saturday, NBC, Notre Dame's probably going to play a little bit above its pay grade. And USC just needs to plant the flag and establish the standard that everyone expects, the standard that we have not really seen in a meaningful occasion, in an appreciably big game this season. And, maybe just the realization of, in August, looking at this schedule, every USC player knew it. Like the first half of the season didn't look all that imposing. Like there's no game you circle on your calendar. I mean, the Colorado game kind of acquired some media buzz and some interest because of what happened with Dion. But like in August, no one was saying, oh, that Colorado game, that's a centerpiece game. But everyone knew before the season, Notre Dame, October 14th, that was when everyone had to really kick it up a notch and be ready to be at their best. And so maybe this team has just been mentally coasting, drifting. I'm not saying that's acceptable. I'm not saying that's the way you should play. I'm not saying that's the way you should be coached. But maybe human nature being what it is, this team's just kind of been, in second gear, and maybe this is the game it goes to first gear. I mean, I hope that's how it happens, but I'm going to say you can't just flip the switch. And that's what has me so concerned. Like, thought the defense would show up in the first quarter, with Bryson Shaw defending Alex Grinch heading into the Arizona game. Didn't happen. So I'm not going to say that I'm optimistic. All right. But if you can still make an argument, maybe this is the time this USC team takes on a different mentality, and it will need to if it's going to beat Notre Dame on the road.
What I can't quite figure out, and I don't think anyone can answer this for sure, is that from a scheduling standpoint, that takes its toll on teams emotionally, mentally, physically. These two teams are coming at this game from completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Notre Dame had a titanic matchup against Ohio State a few weeks ago, and they gave it their best shot, threw haymakers, did everything they could, and were exasperated at the end of that game and just had their hearts ripped out of their chests on the final play of the game. Then they go to Duke, and we can dismiss Duke is not a brand name, not a big game, but Saturday night, Fowler and Herbstreit there, ABC there. It was a big game. They were only a 5-point favorite, and they had to pull that game out on a 4th and 16 play on the final drive. And then they go to Louisville. And again, I don't know what's in the locker room, what's going on in regards to how lightly or how seriously they're taking Louisville, but they obviously should have because they were trampled in the second half after it being a very hotly contested game. Louisville was the team that was on its game late, and Notre Dame's coaching staff not on its game. And maybe the team was gassed after playing 3 marquee primetime type games. I don't want to lift them to the standard of a Notre Dame USC game. They're not. When I say marquee, I mean just what was on the line. Louisville's still an undefeated football team. So was Duke, and they were on prime time in front of everyone. So they have to get up a 4th consecutive time. So just a small slice of me says, well, Notre Dame's battle tested and USC's not. That's an advantage. Most of me says, well, USC, as you pointed out earlier, Matt, has this reserve of energy and focus and everything that's ready to be jettisoned in the direction of Notre Dame versus Notre Dame, now a 4th consecutive difficult game and tough opponent, and having to get back up for this. They're really going to need that crowd to lift them up.
It's a very interesting line of analysis. Hey, Mark, I know that you count on myself and Tim to kind of carry the conversation because you had a full day of shows at the Voice of College Football, but I do have to ask you a question and make you work a little bit here. And that is, Ohio State is looking very ordinary. I mean, 2.5 quarters, boy, very underwhelming from Ohio State. How much does that make you rethink that Ohio State Notre Dame game in terms of what you saw in that game and how that, by extension, affects your overall perception of the Irish and just how good they are or aren't?
Yeah. So if we didn't know anything about these athletes going into 2023, the programs, the athletes, anything, and we were just taking this season on its own, then I would have a pretty reserved viewpoint on these two teams' capabilities. That I would consider them, they're good football teams, but they're not going to threaten for a national championship. However, I still have a level of trust in Ohio State's talent, much more so than Notre Dame's. And I think Kyle McCord was playing his first road game, difficult environment, all that. I think his level of play is improving markedly each week. Ohio State has an offensive line issue that if they clean that up, the rest of the team is playing pretty well. But to correct an offensive line mid-season, that's a tough chore, and that's what's really hurting them. Notre Dame, they what I was tired of watching in that game for 3.5 quarters was guys just running stick routes for Notre Dame and turning around and throwing their hands up in front of their face like they were, postmen, underneath the basket waiting for a pass and just getting 6-8 yard passes thrown to them. But I looked up halfway through the third quarter and it's still 3-0, then it's 10-0. And I'm thinking, well, it's working in terms of the Ohio State defense, keeping them off the scoreboard, but they were moving the ball between the 25s with that they're not going to hit unless USC blows coverages. They are not going to win one-on-one matchups. I'm pretty confident in saying that. Although that Mitchell Evans is a clone of Michael Mayer in many ways. He is the next in line. He is really good, and he's the biggest threat that they have offensively from a receiver standpoint.
Yeah, I do think, Mark, that if Notre Dame's going to win, just in terms of, I'm not predicting this is going to happen, but I'm thinking, just if I'm a Notre Dame coach or player and I'm thinking, what's my best path to victory? It's not going to be airing it out down the field. I mean, though I do think Notre Dame's going to need to find some plays just to loosen up the USC defense a little bit, but it's really going to be, can we mash against the defensive front? Can we use our offensive line to control the ball, use Estime, feed him a lot, move the chains, 8-minute drives, turn Caleb Williams into a spectator. I mean, I just think if you're looking at this from Notre Dame's viewpoint for a moment, that's the most direct path to victory. Get close to 40 minutes time of possession, and you don't give Caleb Williams very many possessions, and maybe you give Caleb and USC 8 possessions. Well, he might have to score on 5 of them, at least 4 of them, if USC is going to win. So that to me seems to be Notre Dame's path, to lean on the ground game, occasionally sprinkle in a play action pass, but really shorten the game as much as possible. That seems to be Notre Dame's best chance on Saturday.
Tim, before you cut loose on this, just consider point totals, which I think don't tell us a lot about an offensive team's production in one particular game. But week after week after week, in these 3 weeks, you're looking at, for Notre Dame, 14. You're looking at 21 with a last-minute touchdown to put them on top. And then you're looking at 20 with a garbage touchdown late. So, man, you're looking at a very limited offensive performance, and then we contrast that to what the USC defense has shown us, and it is going to be fascinating to see, the opposite of the irresistible force and the immovable object, whatever that is, between that matchup.
Yeah, well, so again, if you erase those 13 overtime points, which I mean I'm comfortable doing, USC is giving up 24 points a game, which is not great, but it's not tragic either when you have an offense that's putting up 40 plus every single game. So it's not about, look at Iowa. Iowa never gives up a lot of points. Unfortunately, they never score any points. So this game is not about, who leads the nation in total yardage, who has the lowest, the defense holding their opponents to the lowest score. It's who has the most points at the end of the game. And we knew there would be shootouts. I don't want anyone. It seems like this year people have really been trying to change the script on what this needs to be for USC. USC needs a defense that doesn't lose them games and allows this offense and Lincoln Riley to win the game. And Caleb Williams, again, like you saw on that was supposed, that run play he had on the 2-point conversion, I don't know if you saw it, Mark, was supposed to be a pass play. The receiver fell down. So he improvises, just like like an Oklahoma drill, and he just jukes that guy and gets the cone, the ball right inside the cone. That's what Caleb brings you, and I don't see anybody on that defense. And Zach Branch, there was a question earlier from a couple of people about Zach Branch. We know nothing about Zach Branch. This is modern football, you guys. There's no leaks anymore. This isn't the Helton era where like more leaks than the Titanic. It's not that anymore. It's like you have a situation where it's big boy football. Just like everyone else across the country, no one releases anything, and you're stupid if you do because you're giving your opponent, an advantage. So, short story in Branch is nobody knows what his story is. USC football is going to outscore most of the teams they play. The defense has to not lose the game, period. No one's looking for the defense to win the game for USC. We don't need the defense to win the game for USC. We need them to get off the field once in a while and let Caleb do what he does. And that's what I think we do on Saturday.
These transitive property discussions don't work. I get it. But look at who Notre Dame played the last 3 weeks. Ohio State, Duke, Louisville. Okay. if USC is better than the last two opponents for sure, and we could argue all night who's better, USC or Ohio State, and I'm sure I would lose in this discussion, but I would win Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. on the Ohio State channel. But so it's that close. You could argue USC, Ohio State. Who knows? Maybe they'll play in a playoff game. But that's certainly comparable. And anyone who says it's not debatable is a moron. So it is debatable,
Definitely,
one way or the other. So I wouldn't even argue that Ohio State's the clear choice. But the last 2 weeks, we would expect USC would beat Louisville. We would expect USC would beat Duke. But the USC team that showed up against Colorado, Arizona State against those two teams would lose those games. Yeah. Now, the thing we don't know.
I'm not sure why you guys say that. Wait, but I'm not going to let that one just go. I mean, the USC scored how many points is Colorado?
Yeah, not Colorado, but ASU and Arizona. Let's put it that way.
Okay, yeah, those two teams, yeah. But I mean, to say all those three of those games, yeah,
out of the ACC are better than the teams that USC played. This is my point, that if USC put down the same performance, they would have lost those games. However, what we don't know is if USC was presented with those teams on those same days, would they have played in the same manner, or would they have been on a higher level of alertness to kick it into gear and win those games? This Arizona game, this was the first one that was like on the edge. Like I was sitting here taking calls, doing what I do, but watching it thinking, I expect USC to pull this out. But when you go to overtime, you're in overtime. It could be lost on any play, on any situation. Why Arizona is throwing a sweep like they're the Green Bay Packers on that 2-point conversion, I have no idea. But
because Mark, did you watch the fourth quarter? If you watch the fourth quarter, then you know why they did, because they were running it right and left, and they looked like the 70s Trojans doing student body right and student body left with that toss play. Okay. So I mean, they were gashing USC with that play. They were very confident that they would get on that with Coleman.
I think maybe they were, and I did.
They did one too many times, and then you had Cobb jump in and stop him. But it was working the whole night for that.
I always tend to think that if you have a somewhat athletic quarterback, your 2-point play should be something that allows him to either run or throw, to give him the option and threaten the defense in both ways. That they're either going to come up on him or they're going to drop it, put them in conflict.
Well, yeah, I would say this too, Mark, though. Here's one thing. So USC's defense is the boomer bust defense. And when it's booming, it booms, meaning the guys up front, those front four, and sometimes, if you get Cobb or Tacky Curtis on a blitz, it is boomer bust. That's the problem with this defense, is the fact that, they'll hold you to third down and then they'll give up a 30-yard play. You know what I mean? So I kind of see what they were all over Fafita in that game a lot. And so I can see why when the field shrinks, they were having some trouble on their pass plays, except for what they did is they did a play on fourth down and then they converted in the corner. They ran the exact same play for a 2-point conversion with T-Mac this time instead of Cowing, and got a touchdown on the same exact play. So I was surprised they wouldn't roll them out and try to run something like that, but I can see the thinking behind it. Jed Fish is one thing I'm going to say, I don't think that they finished in the top half of the Pac-12, but I can see Arizona knocking off somebody. Again, they took USC and Washington, two teams that we think of, two of, if not the two best teams in the Pac-12, to the wire. They had SC on the ropes in the first quarter, but am I saying they're going to be a great team? No, but I think people are going to be looking at this Arizona and not giving them enough credit, because their issue isn't really their issues on defense, not quite on offense. And they figured out whatever they were running with those 7 defensive backs and just kind of just making, keeping everything underneath, small windows with that zone. It worked against Penix and DeBoer, and it worked against Riley and Caleb. It did. The proof's in the pudding. I mean, both these teams, Penix didn't even throw for a touchdown in that game. I think Caleb had 1. So in 2 games, that defense allowed 2 guys that have dozens of touchdowns, kept them to 1 touchdown between the 2 of them. I mean, there's something there. It's not a fluke for them to do that. Am I saying that they're going to challenge and be in the playoffs Are they going to have a chance to win the Pac-12? No. But I don't think this is a nothing burger team. I think people should kind of give them a little bit of credit for what they're able to do.
I do think Penix still had a nice game. Yeah, he still threw for 363, 30 of 40. So I'm guessing he set up a lot of those touchdowns.
It was just a lot of dink and dunk the whole way. Look at Odunze. Look at their receivers. Look at the longest reception for the receivers. What was it, 24 yards for that receiving group?
There was a 57-yarder in there, but otherwise, yeah, it looked like it was 24.
So I mean, they gave up. They gave a 20
against Oklahoma. Like the stat sheet looks really good, but I don't think you'd say that was an especially strong performance from yours against the Sooners.
Well, interceptions will do that. That'll mitigate a game pretty quick. But yeah, I mean, look, I hate doing this, but I think the truth's a little more in between. I think people are really, it's a great storyline. Hey, look, USC sucks. Fire Grinch. But okay, it's great for clicks. I know it is. But this defense gave 11 points, Mark. 11 points in the second half.
All right. Let's get into the Grinch part, because we really haven't done it. And one of the really big, shiny plot points of this game is that Alex Grinch, Jared Parker, two of the, if they aren't the worst coordinators in the country, there are certainly two coordinators that are both on the hot seat. There are two coordinators that are both not doing a good job with the material they have. And I think we need to ask ourselves at USC, and Notre Dame folks can have their own conversation about Jared Parker, but like Jared Parker is squandering Sam Hartman. We can say that much. Like Sam Hartman, like this was supposed to be an upgrade for the Notre Dame team, offense, passing game, and we're not getting it. And Parker just seems out to lunch in terms of schemes and what he's able to unlock with the passing game, with the route trees, the route combinations. If Alex Grinch cannot do at least a decent, like B- level job against Jared Parker and Notre Dame, like, wouldn't that be the ultimate final indicator that he is just not cut out for this? So, I mean, it's an amazing plot point when you consider, like, these are two of the most embattled coordinators in the whole FBS going up against each other. It's the opposite of a heavyweight battle. As Mark said, it's the resistible force against the movable object. It's exactly the opposite of this clash of titans. And so for either one of these coordinators, like if they can't beat the other guy who's struggling and having a bad year, Tarmac City, baby. I mean, I really think that the unique aspect of this game lends itself to that kind of action from either side. Whoever, if one side really face plants, whether it's the USC defense or the Notre Dame offense, it would merit that kind of response. I'm not joking. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or just get clicks, because it's, these are two coordinators that are both viewed in very low esteem right now. And they're both desperate for a big performance. They both need to show that they can, rise to at least a moderate standard of competence. So if either one fails badly in this head-to-head, whether it's Alex Grinch or Jared Parker, to me, that would come across as a decisive moment. And I don't think that's overstating things. Now, with Notre Dame, you do have the reality that you're already out of the playoff. So like you're not playing for huge prizes because you don't have a conference championship game to pursue. So maybe if you're Notre Dame, you don't have the same level of urgency. But for USC, like if you lose this game, now it would be a crusher for the playoff, but it's not a conference game. So like the Pac-12 championship game and winning the conference title, that would still be very much in play. And so if Alex Grinch face plants against a struggling offense and a struggling offensive coordinator for Notre Dame, you either bring in Greg Brown from his defensive analyst chair to take over the defense, or you try and figure out another plan. But I really do think that this is a game in which Alex Grinch should be coaching for his job. And some people might say, well, that's hot take city. You're taking it way too far. That might be true. And by the way, like, I don't think Lincoln Riley's going to make this kind of move. So I'm not predicting it will happen. But I think if USC really takes itself seriously as a championship level football program, and Alex Grinch just completely slips on a banana peel against a not very good offensive coordinator, Jared Parker, gonzo. That's my opinion.
So here's my take on that, because I'm tired of covering this one. You're right. He's not going to fire him because no head coach is going to fire him. They're 6-0, so you're going to fire him at 6-1 for losing to Notre Dame. At that point, the entire season is still ahead of us, Matt. Literally, it's not a conference game. So USC still has a chance at the conference. And if you fire Grinch, you kiss the conference goodbye, because they're not going to change in the middle of the season. They're not going to change the scheme. They can't. You're not going to do that. So the best chance to win this season is to stay with Grinch. I will agree with you that if he goes into Notre Dame, lays an egg, and costs us that game on national television, greatly impacting their chances of making the playoffs, because you still have Oregon, you still have Washington, you still have who knows what rising he may come back from the dead and play at the Coliseum. You still have UCLA. There's a lot of tough games still on USC's schedule. And if they drop this game to Notre Dame, it's going to make it almost near impossible to get through the rest of the season, including a championship game, without a loss. So this game is pivotal, but they're not going to fire him. And quite frankly, in my opinion, they shouldn't fire him, because we still have all the eggs in front of us. You're right. We lose to Notre Dame. We probably lose the playoffs, but we still have a chance to win the conference. And I haven't been brainwashed by ESPN. The playoffs is not the one and only thing you do in college. It isn't. And to win the conference or the last Pac-12 conference, to me, would be, not the goal. It would be a huge disappointment. This is a playoff team, in my opinion. Ability and players, this should be a playoff team. And whoever's accountable for that should lose their job, regardless of what the reason is. If the defense costs us a shot at the playoffs, I think Grinch will be gone, But firing him midseason, I know that's what the fans want to hear. They always want to fire someone, because the fans think that if we fire him, we bring him in and we're going to fix the season. No, we fire him, the season's over. So we got that Grinch guy because, okay, great. What does that get you? Probably get you one or two more losses. That's just me. That's too emotional. I can't do it.
Fair enough. I would say that losing to Notre Dame and Jared Parker is what would end the season, not making the actual move to fire Grinch. Again,
I mean, it's game 7. If you want to throw the white flag up in game 7, that's fine. But we'd still be undefeated in the Pac-12.
Yeah. Against Arizona State, Colorado, and Stanford.
What do you think our odds of winning? And I want your honest truth. Do you think our odds of winning go up or down if you bring Brown in as the defensive coordinator? You fire the guy whose scheme it is. You think it goes up? Because Brown has no experience. He has 1 year of experience in the DC.
I wouldn't say the odds go down.
I'd say
it's 50-50. And Greg Brown, he's been a defensive coordinator before. He has experience coordinating a defense.
How many years?
Tim, not a lot. But the other thing is, this is less about scheme. And in many ways, Tim, this, one of the criticisms of Alex Grinch, it's too complicated. He's giving guys too many different roles. They don't have clarity of assignment, clarity of mission going into games. He makes things too muddled. So you get another guy who's probably going to almost certainly, and I could say 100% certainty, the scheme would be simplified and dressed down. It would be very bare bones. So you get very simplified responsibilities. That could be exactly what this defense needs, Tim.
Well, and Grinch came in. Grinch again, and Riley said this. He said, "I'm going to take a more hands-on role in the defense. I'm going to be more involved." He said that at the beginning of the season. So instead of firing Grinch, I say what you do is you say, "Hey, Alex, Brown's going to come in here right now, and we're going to have a little talk, and we're going to game plan together, and then we're going to tone this thing down." I could see that, but removing it doesn't make sense. Yes, I think they should be in maybe a conversation where he says, "Hey, look, we're changing your defense. You're going to call it, but you're going to call it tighter. You're going to give guys, we're not going to leave the corners on an island. We're going to cover the deep middle, not expect the safety to make a split decision. And if he goes one direction off the hash the wrong way, we have a wide open touchdown." I mean, you're right. I agree on simplifying it. I just don't feel the emotional charge like everyone says, "Fire Grinch, fix the season." I'm sorry. You can't sell me on that. That's like throwing the white flag up.
You know what? I'm not, I think it is my come across to some that I think that firing Grinch is a magic bullet. No. So I want to be clear there. I don't think it's this magic bullet solution, but I do think there's something to be said for, my philosophy of firing coaches, whether it's head coaches or coordinators, assistants. You fire a coach when you arrive at the moment when you know, like you don't say, it's probable that he's never going to reach beyond a certain standard. It's not probably or maybe. With certainty he's never going to reach a certain standard. That's my philosophy for firing coaches. And so if you lose to Jared Parker, like if you get undressed by Jared Parker, like we're not talking about one of the great Notre Dame offenses of all time with Brady Quinn, or from the 1970s with Joe Montana. This is a scuffling, struggling offense. Like that's part of this. Like I'm not saying if you lose to Notre Dame, you should be fired. It's losing to this Notre Dame team with this not very good offense, with this horrible, much maligned offensive coordinator who's having a horrible year and who is in over his head under Marcus Freeman. It's those details. I just want to be clear about that. It's not Notre Dame. It's
I get you.
In this Notre Dame situation. And so if you lose to Jared Parker, that to me comes across as one of those moments when it's never going to be at the level it needs to be. And so
very valid.
That's sufficient to pull the trigger.
I hear you. That's all very valid. I just say the timing's wrong. You could decide that you're firing some guy in October, Matt, but then you let him finish the season because it's what's best for the team. But in that moment, like you said, that makes a lot of sense. You get out coached by Jared Parker, a tight ends coach. That is saying, okay, we need to move some direction. The only way we're differing is I'm saying the timing, because I'm saying we've talked about this. Many people talked about this. That was not a 4-8 team 2 years ago. But if you take the rudder off the ship, as bad as everyone feels this defense has been, and I'll tell you right now, I'm not on Grinch. I've been saying I'm still trying to see this guy show me something, and he hasn't yet. But my point is I do believe at this point in the season, going into the 7th game, right? We're not going to pull any coordinator we're going to want. Already has a job price set for Leonard, right? All of them are probably in a defensive coordinator job, right? We're not going to pull them mid-season. So I just don't want to, get the pitchforks out. We have our scapegoat. It was Grinch all along. It will be Grinch all along. But the thing is he gives USC the best chance to win the rest of the season. And there's still an outside chance, again, like I said, of winning the Pac-12. Without Grinch, as bad as we want to say he is, they're not winning the Pac-12.
Notre Dame is 17th in the nation in yards per play. And I'm not saying that is...
Tennessee State had a lot to do with that.
I understand. I understand that, but everybody has their Tennessee States on the schedule. And Notre Dame has played 3 really good teams the last... I would say Ohio State probably has a top 15 defense in the country. And Duke and Louisville are probably more in that 35 to 40 range. So, and they played a MAC school before that. Before that stretch, they played Navy, Tennessee State, and a MAC school, whoever it was, Central Michigan.
Was that yards per play, Mark?
Yes.
Because I'm looking at what I'm looking at is the net, right? Is the points per play margin between the two, and they're like the 20th in the country.
Yeah, 6.98 yards per play on offense. Washington's number 1, USC's 2, Oregon 3.
And like the jump is like well over a yard, I would think, correct?
Oh,
per play.
Well, Washington's at 8.8. USC's at 8.4, and Oregon's at 8, practically 8 flat, and Notre Dame's just a shade under 7.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge leap between the top 5 echelon, and then you get. I'm not saying they're crap, but also like we talked about. I mean, you guys are telling me these ACC, I think Louisville played a great game, and we're talking about these defenses. I think you need to keep it. There's a lot of people that are still already downplaying the Pac-12 and Pac-12 football, and I mean, I'm not ready to anoint the ACC as world beaters either yet.
I'm not downplaying Pac-12 football. I just ranked it as the best conference in America a couple of weeks ago. I'm not downplaying Pac-12 football, but I'm downplaying some of the schedules because the schedule hasn't been played out yet in the Pac-12. only 2 or 3 out of 9 league games have been played. So I'm not downplaying the Pac-12. I'm playing up Notre Dame's schedule versus a lot of other teams across the country because they've played Ohio State, Duke, NC State, Louisville. They've played a decent schedule. And while that doesn't sound like a great schedule, compare that to most teams' schedules.
No, that is a good schedule. I'm not saying it's bottom of the barrel, but at the same time though, the Ohio State I give you, but I'm not ready to anoint. Louisville has a great start to the season, and Austin and I were celebrating it yesterday. They got some playmakers, but I'm not sold on them being anything super special in football. You know, everyone was talking about last night. Ooh, Louisville. It's like, yeah, Louisville had a good game.
Not what I'm trying to sell, but I'm selling the 17th rated offense in yards per play against good competition. I'm not elevating Louisville to Georgia standards or Duke or anyone. And I'm not even completely sold on the Ohio State defense, although Maryland typically puts up yardage and points on most teams, and they held them in check.
I'm escaping the guy's. I'm forgetting the guy's name. So McCord's the first time. You know, I mean, he's not a freshman, but he's a new quarterback. He's had a little bit of struggle with your offensive line. It's the Cal quarterback that Jack Plummer over at. I mean, they haven't played any great quarterbacks. So I'm going to say I wouldn't consider that the Louisville offense or the Louisville defense. You know, as far as them being elite, I'm not seeing those things.
I didn't go anywhere near the elite level. Again, we were trashing the Notre Dame offense, talking about how limited it is. And I said all those things.
I was trashing the Notre Dame
was
offense.
as well.
I'll take ownership.
I was as well. I don't believe that they've got playmakers on the outside. I've seen a lot of Notre Dame football. I watched the last 3 weeks, start to finish. I saw quite a bit of the NC State game, and the Navy game seems like it was like 4 months ago at this point. I don't think that they have playmakers that are going to threaten this defense downfield. And I believe that their offensive line, by most team standards, would still be a good offensive line, but it's not a vintage Notre Dame offensive line. And I think those are two huge limitations. So I was just responding that I was surprised to see. I'm like looking down around 60, 70, looking around, and then I go all the way up to number 17.
It's a lot higher than I ever would have expected.
But isn't that an indictment on the teams that they played then? If they have a sluggish team that looks very bad offensively, but they're still putting up big numbers, I'm just saying, then maybe the defenses they're playing aren't too stout.
Yeah. Duke held Clemson to a touchdown. And Clemson shot themselves in the foot. I understand that repeatedly, but they still held Clemson to 7 points. And, you know, we can always play this game of going to the next team and how good are they, and how good are they, and how good are they. But I still think Clemson, despite their issues and losing 2 games, they're still a top 25 level team.
Well, it's not like that they're a pushover. I mean, I think that the truth, again, like always, is somewhere in between. I don't think that they have a terrible offense, but I think that USC, even with the struggling defense, this is not good. I don't think in the beginning year I thought it was be one of the better offenses they played. But the way their defensive pass protection, the way their pass protection was in that Louisville game, and just the amount of drops and the playmakers on the outside for them, you know, you have Hartman, which is an upgrade. You have Estime, who I have all the respect in the world for, and the other back. I love their other running back. They've got good running backs. I thought they would pair that with a really good offensive line and a solid passing game, because that's what you need. You need a balance, and that would have crushed USC. I think that. What does USC do well, Matt, Mark? We're a pass rushing team. We pressure quarterbacks. What are they having trouble? What did we see in that last game? They couldn't protect Hartman for anything. And that's a bad recipe. So that means they have to rely on the run game. If you rely on the run game, you become one-dimensional, and that's when things go sideways. I don't know. I think it's gonna be a great game. It's Notre Dame. It's in South Bend. It's gonna be muddy. It's gonna be a nasty game, and I hope it's a great game.
I'll tell you the other number I was surprised to see, and this is not factual, this is a projection, but Vegas has placed Notre Dame as a 2.5-point favorite. I would have guessed that USC would have been about a 4-point favorite. That would have been my guess.
Yeah.
Historically, South Bend, USC does not win in South Bend. Go back forever. Some of the better USC teams, they go to South Bend and they lose.
And I also think Notre Dame's a smart. I mean, Mark, totally agree with you. I would have said USC by like a 5.5 points. but just, thinking about this, processing it, this is an expectation of where the public is in terms of where the money's likely going to come in evenly on both sides. And Alex Grinch is much more of a national punching bag than Jared Parker is. Like, Notre Dame fans are furious at Jared Parker, but Alex Grinch is that he has national reach, not in a good way, but like Alex Grinch is going to be such a storyline heading into this game. And I think that's why, like, there's a sense that the public awareness of USC's flaws is pronounced enough that Notre Dame still checks in as a small favorite. It's also, the Beano Cook quote from earlier, Notre Dame rallying around the flag at a home night game. Really quickly, sorry guys, on the bottom I put in, these are all of our members that you guys have been working so hard for. There have been a number of members that have been long-time patrons of the channel. Romney here is on the highest tier. That's why I put him as champion. And I got to talk to you, Mark, about the different setups, because somehow you have Big Ten champion, and you got Heisman Trophy, and others. I didn't understand the levels, but I put it by month. Understand the levels. Yeah, I don't know why the Big Ten champion. I was looking toward the future, of course. Looking toward the future. They're thinking, okay, this is something USC fans want to hear. Yeah, we're going to go win the Big Ten championship. So that was the thought process. And of course, this is the school and the land of the Heismans. So does that not fall into place? We like our national. Why don't we put 11 national championships as our number one group? I think that's what we're most proud of here at USC, is the fact that we've got 11 national championships. Okay. But anyway, so here's these guys are our members. Thank you guys so much. I've been scrolling the whole game because we really appreciate you guys. Some of these guys have been members for quite some time once we rolled it out, and we don't do this nearly enough. I'm sorry, guys, but we do need this, you guys. We're trying to get the 4,200 subscriptions. Make sure you're hitting that bell notification as well, because Matt and I go, like, just yesterday, we went and did a call-in show. We had a great showing, but we could add more of you guys on there if you actually hit that subscription and the bell notification. That way you know when we go live. It won't be just for games on Sundays. It'll be if there is real breaking news. We will go live, and we'd love hearing your calls. The calls have been amazing. It's a phone line. It's not through StreamYard, so it's very accessible for you guys, and we're hearing from people we've never heard of before, and we encourage you guys to come to any of our call-in shows and be heard. Especially about Alex Grinch, because that's a hot number. Absolutely. We do need to hit a super chat, I believe, before we take off. Eddie Chase chiming in with this one. Why rationale is there for DCOC not being fired during middle of the season? It's happened before, not magic solution, but it sends message to the team and recruits. When SC loses 2 games, fired. Well, I'll tell you what, if he loses to Washington and Oregon, fine, go ahead and fire him, because we're not winning anything. Right? The season's over at that point. My point was about firing him after we lose to Notre Dame, which is not a conference game, and we'd still be in the hunt for a national championship, be it a miracle run, but the season's not over after a loss, even if it is to Gerard Parker. That's where Matt and I don't disagree on the fact that, 1, Grinch is not getting it done. 2, if he doesn't get it done, he needs to go. Where we start to disagree is, and I see Matt makes good points. I just say I put too much of a premium. Maybe it's me just for this team. Like, I really do feel that when you fire a coach, now a head coach, that's different, because then you start the process and vetting of other head coaches. So the DC situation, you guys, is there are DCs out there. We know who they are. There's some big name coaches, I'm sure, that either on hot water right now as a head coach, or everyone wants Jim Leonard. He's floating out there still. So there are, but none of these guys are available right now. So firing him right now and getting an interim is not going to show anybody. I get the recruiting angle to a degree. So once he loses 2 games and we're no longer in the hunt for even a conference championship, yeah, let's go. Get rid of him, and then we'll go from there. But, it's also, remember, it's big picture. There are players on this team that work their asses off, and you really want to scuttle their season because you want to get a 5-star? I mean, I don't. These guys work too hard for us to ruin their senior year. And a guy like Caleb, who gave us a Heisman Trophy, who's probably going to be, well, definitely one of the best players ever at USC, and arguably, and I'm without a doubt almost, probably the best quarterback we will ever have. Do you really want to send that guy out with a couple losses because we have an interim guy who is basically known as a secondaries coach as our defensive coordinator?
I'm just not that emotional. I don't want to do that.
All right. Appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football on our USC show that we provide each and every Monday. Trojan Conquest Live, 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific. In the meantime, to get ready for all of your Trojan needs in regards to USC Notre Dame coming up on Saturday, Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire.
Ooh.
Matt, what's going on there this week?
Well, I've been writing about how USC can potentially handle the Alex Grinch situation, written a couple of articles on this, mapping out some scenarios, also walking people through some of the details that should go into having an emergency plan if things go very south very quickly. Wrote 2 different articles about Alex Grinch. You can find that at Trojans Wire, along with what will be our week-long coverage of Notre Dame. You want to follow Fighting Irish Wire for the Notre Dame side of things. But there's a lot on Alex Grinch, and I'm trying not to be hot takey or knee jerky, trying to just figure out, is there a realistic plan that USC, Jen Cohen and Lincoln Riley can consider if things get worse? And that's the kind of thing that, it's crisis planning. You hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. I'm talking about that at Trojans Wire right now.
And Matt, I know you probably have to go, and Mark, you as well, but can we just quickly hit this news? We didn't talk about it, but it's the USC's opponents for next year. The 2024 opponents were announced. It looks look at USC's schedule. I mean, so we know that our non-conference is Notre Dame and next year LSU. So it's Notre Dame and LSU. Notre Dame will be at home, but LSU will be in Las Vegas. Then we're playing on the road at Michigan, at Washington and Seattle, and then on the road to UCLA, and then we get Penn State at home. Now, I don't know if that's gonna be the toughest schedule in the country, but it's got to be one of the top 5. Well, I mean, at the end again, we have Brian Kelly, so maybe that'll be a joke layup next year because you know how much I love that guy. But I mean, that's a hell of a schedule. What are you guys' thoughts on it?
2 items. One is that, Washington won't have Michael Penix, so it's going to be really interesting to see what Kalen DeBoer and Washington do for their quarterback situation next year. That'll affect the degree of difficulty there. And I think that if USC can just split Michigan and Washington on the road, it would look pretty good for the Trojans' chances of making the Big Ten championship game. The other reaction is, given this loaded Big Ten slate, will USC duck out of that LSU game in Las Vegas? I mean, now people might scream, "Oh, that would be weak. That would be cowardly. That's not USC. We're always up for a challenge." Fair enough, but with this kind of Big Ten schedule, adding the LSU game to the plate, and of course you already have Notre Dame as a non-conference game. Would this be the year you really want to play LSU week 1? That is something that needs to be thought about. And let's remind ourselves, USC already has rescheduled a 2024 game. It was initially scheduled to play San Jose State, flip that game to Utah State. So the idea of backing out of that LSU game, while it would make a lot of people angry, like I get it. I'm not saying USC necessarily should do it, but consideration should be given to that. And with not having Caleb Williams, it's going to be the first game for either Miller Moss or Malachi Nelson. It's going to be interesting to see if USC sticks with that LSU game on the schedule.
Yeah, we will certainly slice and dice this one. It was my intent to go to each one of these new Big Ten schedules and look them over. I just haven't had a chance to look at it, so I will be producing videos at some point. Certainly, it will be a shock to Big Ten Western Division teams. Let me tell you that, because we were playing along when the schedule was released. We did a live stream, and I simply would say, look at it this way. Take a particular team's schedule, like in Iowa. Who do they play this year in the Big Ten Eastern Division? Okay, who are they going to play in the Big Ten? Okay, that's a wash. But who are they replacing those 6 opponents in the Big Ten West with? Well, 3 of them stay the same each year: Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska. Who's replacing Northwestern Illinois and Purdue? Well, it's some array of like Washington, USC, and then it's like Maryland or something. But it's just they're basically playing. They're playing into 3 more losses is what they're looking at right now. 2 to 3 more losses. Not that Iowa can't win games against Oregon and Washington, because they will, but not most of them. They will lose most of the time.
Yeah, that's right.
If Washington and Oregon maintain their current pace. Now, Washington, they have been a roller coaster ride for decades. So we will see.
And then one last thing, sorry. Thursday, it might be Wednesday, Matt. I got to talk to you about this. If we can move it to Wednesday, because this person's it's a travel day. He's going back to South Bend. We might have a national champion coming on to talk a guy that if you're a Trojan, you're going to know who he is. He's prominent in college football. He's prominent with the Trojan lore for sure. About a very special, and no, it's not Reggie Bush. Oh, I said his name. I gotta say it. Give Reggie his trophy back. It's not Reggie Bush, but it is a guy that was a national champion and one of the most memorable, not the Bush push game, but one of the most memorable Notre Dame games of all time. And there's 2 other people that might be joining us. So make sure you check in. Will ND also will be on the show with us. He'll be calling in. So it should be a really lively show. We've had a great run of calls so far. I think our last show was our best show so far. We're going to try to crank them out. So look for that Wednesday or Thursday. Again, one more time. That's why you have to have your bell notification to know when we're going to go live.
Good stuff. Appreciate y'all being here on Trojan Conquest Live. Make it on back next Monday. And in the meantime, Matt's work at Trojan's Wire. Tim and Matt get together either on Wednesday or Thursday. And then, of course, post-game show right here at the Voice of College Football with Tim, Tony, and Rick on Saturday. See you next week.